This is Neal Preston, and you are watching Rock and Roll Gallery's Shot Talk.
Neal Preston, welcome to Shot Talk.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. We've been talking about Shot Talk since talking was invented.
It's been a couple years.
Well, you struggle and climb the mountain, and sooner or later you reach the top of the mountain. And here we are.
Well, we're sort of starting at the top of the mountain.
In Las Vegas, Nevada, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. How did you get started in film?
I was a rock and roll fanatic. At the Sunday night, the Beatles were on at Sullivan. I was hooked. And the next day I went out and bought Meet the Beatles and this, that, and this, that. And it was all about rock and roll. And when I was about 14 or 13, something like that, right around the same time, my brother-in-law at the time gave me a camera. And I would take it all over and I would shoot all kinds of stuff all over Forest Hills, Queens. Me and my two buddies, Kevin and Louie, we were all into photography. Kevin had dropped out of high school. Louie was about to drop out of high school. And we decided to form a little company called KLN, Kevin, Louie, and Neal. And we were lucky enough to be able to meet the promoters who were promoting the series of rock shows at the Singer Bowl in New York. Shelley Finkel, who went on to be still alive, a big boxing promoter. He managed Mike Tyson for years, et cetera, et cetera. And his partner was Gary Kurfürst. And Gary managed Leslie West. I think he managed the Vagrants first, and then Mountain. And he was from Forest Hills. And Shelley and Gary and Shelley gave us our break and started letting us into their shows because Kevin and Louie had taken some pictures at the Singer Bowl of the Doors and someone else. And they showed them to me. I said, you know what? I bet we could get some free tickets for the shows because the promoter's office was a block and a half from my house on Austin Street in Forest Hills. And we thought it was a ticket office, and it turned out to be the promoter's office. And that's how we met Gary and Shelley. They were the lightning bolt that came from out of nowhere that opened a door for me. And I never looked back. Basically started shooting a lot of stuff all over New York. The Fillmore, obviously the Fillmore East, Academy of Music, because we had entree from the promoters, and at the time there were some new rock magazines forming, and that's how I started meeting people in the media end of the rock and roll business.
That one shot you've got of the Jeff Beck group by the U-Haul with Robert Plant.
Yeah, that's a famous show. That's the Jeff Beck show at the Singer Bowl, and Robert and Jimmy and Bonzo showed up to see Jeff, and I just happened to be backstage and clicked, shot. I knew it was Jeff Beck. I wasn't really sure who the blonde guy was, and Rod was Jeff's singer at the time, so everyone knew everybody else. Robert went on stage singing with Robert and Rod were both together on stage singing at one point, and I think Bonzo passed out at the drums or something, and I don't know, there was all kinds of shenanigans that went on.
I didn't know you did Festival Express.
Yeah, and it was one of the last 6 or 7 gigs that Janis ever did.
I think you got the Doors at the Singer Bowl?
No, I got the Doors at Madison Square Garden and the Felt Forum, which is the smaller venue at Madison Square Garden. And God, I remember that they had the orchestra for Touch Me, and yeah, I ended up at the Led Zeppelin press conference that they did at the Drake Hotel in 1970 when they won the Melody Maker Readers Poll as the best band in the world. First time the Beatles hadn't won in like 8 years. And somehow some PR guy got me into the press conference. And there is video of that press conference. And there's one clip but you can see at the very beginning, obviously the guy's running a camera test, and you see a guy in the very front turning around like this, and my hair's out to here, and it's definitely me. And so I shot them there, and then they got me into the show. I didn't have a pass, but I kind of snuck up. I mean, there's some really good pictures from that show. They did an afternoon show and an evening show at the Garden. And that's before I knew anyone related to Led Zeppelin. The Fillmore is a great place to shoot. I mean, I did the Humble Pie there, CSNY, the Youngbloods, the Allmans, Alice, really early Alice. I mean, where he didn't have the money to spend on the good props, you know. It was like ketchup for blood and stuff like that. In the summer of '71, I got an invitation to go on a press junket to Dallas for the band Three Dog Night. 25 press people were flown from New York to Dallas, 25 from LA to Dallas. And the PR people were friends of mine. So I worked something out where they got me a ticket to go from New York to Dallas and then Dallas to LA. And I spent the summer in LA, which was rock and roll epicenter of the world at that time. And October 15th, 1971, I got on the big Silver Bird and flew from JFK to LAX. And my girlfriend picked me up, and I remember she said, on the way home, I gotta stop at the Forum because Creedence Clearwater is playing and they're clients of mine. Do you mind? Like, no, I don't mind.
And so now you're settled in LA.
Yeah, I'm in LA, and I was introduced to another photographer named Andrew Kent, who at the time, who had been the staff photographer for the LA Free Press, which is kind of our version of the Village Voice. And the staff of the Free Press had some kind of revolt against the publisher, and they all left and started their own competing paper called The Staff. And Andy was the staff photographer for The Staff. But he had shot a lot of rock and roll shows for the Free Press while I was still living in New York. And he had a dark room, and we got along like that, and we decided to form a partnership. In those days, early 70s, it was all about, as far as media was concerned, it was all about servicing the trades. Essentially, Billboard, Record World, and Cashbox were the three big music trade publications. So anytime someone got a gold record, or some president of a label met some artist for a contract signing, they'd want their picture taken, and it would be serviced to the music trades. And every label was having a lot of that stuff shot. And Andy had known someone at Atlantic, and I had known someone at Atlantic through some way in New York. I mean, I did have some contacts from New York that set me up in LA. But we approached Atlantic because they were hiring me and Andy for all kinds of little things. And we worked out a retainer deal where we could get paid X amount of money per month to have one of us available at all times in case Ahmet Ertegun needed to be photographed, or this one or that one. And also have to shoot the Atlantic bands when they came through town, which could have been anyone from Led Zeppelin to Manhattan Transfer to Yes, to you name it. So that turned out to be a really good deal because the people we met, and it was a win-win for Atlantic and for me and Andy.
Well, I remember you saying that even when you went to Kazar in '73 to shoot Zeppelin, you were working for Atlantic.
I was working for Atlantic. I mean, I also did other shows in '73. I can't remember a bunch of them, but well, of course, that was an important band to Atlantic. You know, between Zeppelin and CSNY,
yeah,
those were big bands for them. When we still had the retainer deal with Atlantic, Led Zeppelin formed their own record label, Swan Song, and they had a launch party in New York and one in LA. And I had to go and cover the one in LA for Atlantic. Danny Goldberg, was with them, and I had known Danny for years, and I pulled him aside and I said, listen, this was 74. I said, I know you guys are planning to go on the road early next year. If you're looking for a tour guy or something, I want to throw my hat in the ring. And he said something like duly noted, et cetera, et cetera. And a couple months later, the phone rings and it's Danny, and he said, you still want that job with Zeppelin? I said, yeah. He said, well, get ready to go to Chicago. Led Zeppelin was going out on the road in 75. The Stones were out on the road in 75. So everyone was out on the road, and the Rolling Stones got all the press, because they hobnobbed with Andy Warhol and this one and that one and blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, Led Zeppelin is like eating the Rolling Stones for lunch every day. And I say that all the time. I saw them both in 75. Rolling Stone were nothing. The Stones were nothing compared to Led Zeppelin. But Zeppelin wasn't getting the press because they were known as being anti-press. They hated Rolling Stone because of the early record reviews. But it was decided that they're going to be a little more press friendly. Therefore, we're going to need new pictures to service these outlets that they're going to consent to interviews with. And that's why they wanted a tour photographer. And that was my job. Basically, my job was stay on the road until you don't. And I went for it.
But you traveled on the plane and
Oh,
everything.
yeah, everything. I mean, I was given complete, total access. Unheard of. with that
Nobody
band.
had that at that point.
A little bit here and there, but, look, there was no instruction manual on how to deal with this job. I knew enough about rock stars and people and celebrities and people with egos to know to tread lightly. I knew enough that you never want to act like you're the fifth member of Led Zeppelin or the fifth Beatle, or you're not that important. You're on the crew, and don't act like you're in the band, because you're not. And if you act like you're in the band, the thing slipped under your door one night is going to be your one-way ticket home. It ain't going to be the room list for tomorrow. So I basically kept my eyes and ears open and my mouth shut and just did my job. And I wanted to be invisible. That was the key. How do I be invisible? And the irony is, on a tour, to be invisible, you need to be visible at all times. No one should think twice if the drum roadie comes in the dressing room, or the guitar roadie, or the photographer. A part of the crew. And that's how I treated the job. And it worked. We had a very small tour party. Stones must have had 3 times the amount of people on the road with them.
Well, they were always more elaborate that way. It was more about the hangers-on. Zeppelin was a very
Well, there was
camp.
showbiz. Yeah, showbiz. Zeppelin was, I like to say, cloistered, and which was fine with me.
Then in 76, they had The Song Remains the Same premiere.
Yeah,
You were there.
in L.A. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did one in New York as well. Yeah,
And then 77, you were automatically tapped to be that.
77. Yeah, and didn't they postpone the tour for a month or two? Yeah, because I know we started in April and we were supposed to start earlier, but I did a lot of Swan. I did Bad Company as well.
That's right. But was it assumed that you were going to be Zeppelin's guy in 77 because of how well you did in 75? Or did
Although
you
we never put it, I wouldn't put it that way, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yes, I was their guy here.
Well, you were telling me one time about what you would have to do to process the film in each city. Nobody knows what you're going. They think it's just some magic carpet
No,
ride.
it was a 24/7. It was a lot of work. It was I mean, I didn't sleep for a month, and I don't mean chemically related insomnia. I mean, might have been a little touch of that, but I would have to. We had labs in New York, Chicago, New Orleans, and L.A. And 75 and 77, I'm not sure which lab I used on which tour, but I would put in, after the show, Richard Cole would give me the use of one limo for an hour while I went back to the hotel, got all my film together, wrote up the orders and put them in envelopes, and then the limo would take me to the lab that I had set up, and I'd put it in the night drop. And then at like noon the next day, the lab would send over all the color in boxes, the chromes, and six proof sheets of every roll of black and white. One for each member of the band, one for me, and one for Peter. As every week passed, the stuff, the piles of photos and stuff would get bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, it was a lot to manage. And to not lose any of the negatives and, you know.
But you didn't have an assistant.
I did not have an assistant.
So you're the little Swiss Army knife.
I did it all.
You have a little bit of a break from Zeppelin in 78, 79, they come back to Knebworth. You're the guy at Knebworth.
Yeah, well, what happened was Peter, the deal was Peter wants you to shoot Knebworth, the first show, and they got me a first class ticket from LA to London. They didn't pay me, but I flew over, did Knebworth. Mitchell Fox came running up to me at one point and said, "Do you have any problem going up in a helicopter?" Now, he probably expected me to say, yeah, there's no way.
This is at Knebworth.
Yeah. And I said, show me the helicopter. I mean, I will go up in anything with wings. And he took me out to the little area where the choppers were coming in and out. And we got there just in time to see Jimmy landing. He gets off the chopper. I don't even remember if he said hi to me. I think he might have been just tunnel vision. And I get ready, and the pilot says, all right, come on. And I believe they took the door off so I could shoot. We did one circle around this way, one circle around this way, so I shot some black and white here and some color there. It was very important, Mitchell said, for Peter wants really good crowd shots, as good as he could do. And I said, no problem, because it was a huge crowd. And it was a Jet Ranger helicopter, I remember, and the pilot was great. So I was like, bank left a little, it'd be like, here, bank right, and I had to make sure the camera bag didn't fall out because, you know, a roll of film from 3,000 feet can kill somebody if it's dropped. Anyway, it turned out that Peter, I was an insurance policy. Peter had a feeling, and I'm minimizing it, he knew that the promoter was gonna bone him on the amount of tickets sold. And Peter knew that there were going to be 20 to 30,000 more people at the show than he got paid for. So apparently Peter had access to some newly developed technology by NASA, whereby it's, as we know, is now just scanning and interpolating, but apparently this software, you could take a crowd shot and the computer would split into 4 quadrants, and every quadrant it could estimate plus or minus 100 people, how many were in that quadrant, multiply it times 4, and you'd have the size of the crowd plus or minus 400. And he wanted to have that in his pocket in case he had to sue the promoter, which he did, and he won the lawsuit. One of my buddies in New York was a guy named Mike Hyland, who was the Allman's PR guy. So I had shot the Allmans courtesy of him a couple of times on the East Coast, and I actually photographed Dwayne doing a very famous radio interview, an extensive radio interview with WPLJ, I guess, with Dave Herman was the DJ, and Mike asked me to come and shoot some pictures of Dwayne doing this interview, and Dwayne talked about playing with Eric and the little flutter at the end of Layla. It was a fascinating interview. But yeah, and I shot the Allmans at the Fillmore, and in 72 or in 73, when Brothers and Sisters came out, it was a huge record. Dwayne had already died, and Barry had died, and Cameron got the Rolling Stone assignment to do a cover, and I got the assignment to do the pictures, and we spent pretty much a week on the road with the Allmans. Stillwater, the band in Almost Famous, is not based on Led Zeppelin or any single band. It's actually an amalgam of any band that had two creative forces at odds, more or less. Jimmy and Robert, Mick and Keith, this one and that one. And it's more the Eagles, if you ask me, than it is Zeppelin, but it's not supposed to be Led Zeppelin.
So from there, you said y'all moved on and you got another retainer at A&M?
And then what happened was, let's see, so Atlantic retainer was 72 to 74. And then me and Andy negotiated a better deal for more money, same kind of thing with A&M, from 74 to 77. Jim McCrary had been the staff photographer at A&M. He shot the famous stuff of Graham Parsons with the nudie suit and the Lee Michaels cover where you just see his head. And super talented photographer. So Andy and I took over the photo studio and the photo department at A&M and ran it. I mean, we didn't have to do any of the administrative stuff. We just had to maintain the studio, make sure everything was cool, order film if we needed film. I mean, I didn't pay for personal film for 3 years because Jim McCrary said to us, if you guys take this job, you must spend $3,000 a month at Sammy's camera, because I've been spending it, and you know, if you lower the bar, then the next people after you won't be able to spend that amount of money. So yeah, so all of a sudden now it's A&M, and you know, besides Herb Alpert, who was one of the owners of the company, you had the brothers Johnson, we had Peter Frampton, Joan Armatrading, I can't even, the Tubes. I can't even remember half
Humble
of it.
Pie, Supertramp,
Humble
Cat
Pie,
Stevens,
Supertramp, Cat Stevens. I remember going to Canada with Supertramp. Yeah, and a lot of time with Peter when the big album hit. Brewer and Shipley or someone like that. Yeah. There were a lot of them. And,
well, you said the Captain and Tennille you did a lot
Captain
of work
Tennille.
with.
Yeah, I did a lot of work with the Captain and Tennille. And you know what? It was a blast. Tony and Daryl really, we got along great. I did the photos for their greatest hits record in Hawaii. I worked on their TV specials. And then, of course, when George Harrison started Dark Horse, it was an A&M. A&M was distributor. So then we had George Harrison to shoot. And that didn't hurt.
After Zeppelin, you can pretty much write your own ticket. And you were the guy everybody wanted. What unfolded after that?
Well, I became known as first of all, I was single, so I didn't have a family to have to attend to. Second of all, I was a known quantity. These days you call it a brand, you know. But as I started being a real known quantity, people knew who I was and what I did and how I did it and how I would be able to fit in with pretty much anybody. So whether it was me calling a manager or a manager calling me, I mean, they instantly knew who I was because of Zeppelin, and which led to Queen, which led to ultimately Fleetwood Mac, and others. Yeah, it just started to really snowball.
When did you shoot Springsteen? How did that come about?
I found out that Bruce was going to tour in Japan. This is right after Born in the USA had just come out. And I had done a deal with Wham, who was going to China to do Wham in China for Wham. And then I thought, well, wait, from China, I could hit Bruce in Tokyo. I just need an assignment. So I got an assignment from Rolling Stone to do the beginning of Bruce's tour in Tokyo. It worked out perfectly time-wise. I shot George and Andrew in China. I blew off in Hong Kong and Beijing, and there was a third show. I blew that off to go to Japan and hook up with Bruce. And we did all these pictures in Japan. Bruce ended up using a bunch of them for the tour book, but Rolling Stone had bailed on the assignment at the last minute. I was literally in China, and Rolling Stone said, well, we're not going to pay for the flight to Tokyo, blah, blah, blah. And I got Life magazine to step in and cover the Bruce stuff.
When did you start with Queen?
I started with Queen in '77. Andy Kent and I had a company at one point with Barry Levine called Mirage. And that's a whole nother story I don't want to get into. But Barry had known Roger pretty well and had shot Queen. And all of a sudden, they needed someone to start with them on the East Coast because they were never as big in the States as they were outside the States. And Elektra called me up and said, okay, you're the guy. You meet them in like Providence, Rhode Island, and just when you get there, talk to this guy, Jerry Stickles. Oh my God, that's the guy who threatened to punch me out years ago. I was petrified, you know. Anyway, it all worked out, but I started with them in '77, and I immediately bonded with Brian, who is a photography guy, and I mean, we became like that really quick, and it was a really good fit. I mean, Freddie Mercury's favorite thing in the world was to be Freddie Mercury. You know, he loved it. And that was, I spent a lot of time with them over 6 tours. But '77 was the first time. I had shot them at Santa Monica Civic before I worked for them. And so I kind of knew what I was getting into, but boy, we had fun. And I worked my ass off. We did the South American tour in '81, and you know, it was always something, man. It was always something. And then, of course, Live Aid. I'm on the road with Bruce in the UK. Bruce wanted me to shoot the UK shows. Now I'm working for Bruce, right? And we did Slane Castle. We did Manchester. Obviously London. There might have been one other gig. But that tour, at the last Wembley show was like July 5th at Wembley. There were 2 shows. The first show was where I shot the famous wide angle reverse shot where I mounted a remote camera on stage. And then I found out about Live Aid, and everyone was playing. So I got one of my editors at People to let me stay in England. So for that week and a half, I just, you know, held court at my room at the Mayfair Hotel, and I knew Harvey Goldsmith. I mean, I knew everyone from everywhere, you know, and so I was one of the 2 official American photographers at the British Live Aid. So I'm there shooting Live Aid. I mean, the day before we did shots of Geldof on the field and everything, and we weren't really allowed to go on the stage, even me, because of all the TV cameras and everything, and you know, 1 billion people were watching. But right before Queen went up the steps to do the show, Stickles is there and says to me, "Get your fucking ass up there on stage." I said, okay, because these are my people. This was family. I mean, the Queen crew is as much family as my blood relatives. So I zip up there, and I'm the only photographer that was on the stage ever that day. And I'm up there with Queen, and now it felt like a rock show as opposed to a TV show. And you can see me kind of trying to go back and forth to hide between Brian's amps and some other thing. And I shot 99 rolls of film that day. But that was Live Aid, and I didn't know it was going to be the most famous 25-minute gig in history. I just thought it was a good Queen gig. I was more interested in The Who, anyway, which were a little flat. But, you know, I'm a Pete Townsend guy. So, yeah, but Live Aid was quite the day.
Well, for me personally, I was at the Philadelphia one, and that was one of those days I'll just never forget.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was, I was just a goofy kid, but I was a punter in the audience, and I'll never,
Right.
that was a pretty big deal. We were watching London in
Yeah,
Philly,
yeah.
in between bands, and I remember the whole U2 performance and the Queen thing and all that, but I didn't realize Queen just stole the thunder from everybody.
Apparently so. I didn't realize it at the time. I mean, I'll tell you what, they've fucking killed the Who, and Elton and Bowie. I don't know. But it was Queen. I mean, they played their show. I knew how good they were, but I wasn't thinking about that. It was like, now I'm getting pictures no one else can get. So that's really what I remember that day, other than walking out of the venue at the end of the night and turning around and shooting all the garbage on the field, which is the end papers of my book.
So Neal, it's the 70s. What was everybody's favorite recreation?
Here's what I'm going to say about 70s recreational extracurricular activities, of which there were many. All you people out there who talk about Molly and ecstasy and this one and that one, I got one word for you. Quaalude. Okay? The youngins don't really know about these. People even close to my age will swoon if they see this. This is an actual bottle. The Quaaludes used to come 300 tabs in a bottle. And this is the best ever. I mean, you could take all that other stuff and throw it away. This was it, baby. You never left your house in the 70s without a couple of these in your pocket on a Friday night.
If you had to pick one photo that would define your career, a desert island photo, what photo would it be?
Well,
I know that's a lot of pressure.
Well, you know what? One photo does not define anyone's career. The whole point of a career is creating a body of work. I will say that easily the most famous photo of Freddie Mercury ever is now the one of him bending back, where you see the crowd at Wembley in the background. That, Jimmy drinking the Jack Daniels, Robert holding the dove, those have become really, really well known.
You shot Zeppelin, you were on tour with Zeppelin. A lot of people assume that's your favorite band, but they're not your favorite band. Who's your favorite band?
My favorite band, aside from the Beatles, who hold a special place in my heart, especially John Lennon, but by far my favorite band is The Who. Anyone who knows me knows if you walk into my house, you're going to hear Bob O'Reilly at some point. You're going to hear Pete solo. I make no bones about it. And the day that Pete passes on is not going to be a good day in my life, and I know I'm going to get 100,000 phone calls. Pete may live to be 1,000, but it's for many, many, many reasons. I'm just the world's biggest Pete guy, and what can I say? Everyone else takes a backseat. The Beatles are different. The Beatles are almost not a band. They were an awakening to me. Or as I wrote in my book, watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan was like having John Lennon deliver a fucking bomb directly into the cortex of my brain, a nuclear bomb, a rock and roll nuclear bomb. But working with The Who, especially 73, 74, 75, fuck, those were good shows. And I did the cover for 25 years of Maximum R&B at Winterland. And they were pissed off at each other, and the more pissed off The Who are, the better the show is. That's a rule of thumb. The Kids Are Alright, the two songs they filmed for The Kids Are Alright, Jeff Stein, who directed that, told me some great stories about that day, and it's Pete.
Neal, welcome back to Shot Talk. One of the subjects that I'm not even sure has an end is your album covers and books. I mean, this just goes on forever. The album cover that comes to my mind first and foremost is Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Live at the Fox.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Any others?
Well, no, that one you were just talking about management, and not a lot of people understood the connection with The Who.
Well, The Who and Skynyrd were managed by Bill Curbishley, but in the States, it was Curbishley with Peter Rudge, who managed the Stones. Skynyrd at one point was opening for The Who. It was great. They had a new guitar player, Steve Gaines, and he was phenomenal, and they were great shows, and to this day I can't believe what happened eventually, but it was, I think we shot 3 nights. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 nights. But I remember being on stage with Tom Dowd, having some meetings on the fly with Ronnie and Gary, and whatever they did it right, because that was a smoking band. And I wish I would have been able to see them at Knebworth, because I don't know who they were opening for, but I know they blew whoever it was off the stage. You don't want to go on after Skynyrd. You just don't. Like, you don't want to go on after The Who. But that was fun, and the Bruce Live cover came out at the peak of Bruce Mania. I mean, I remember the night before it came out, it was on the news. They were showing it coming off the conveyor belt, just box after box after box. And I have the original shot. What the art director did was extend the black. And it's simple, but he looks like a rock and roll soldier on it. So I love that one. I love Stevie's Trouble in Shangri-La cover, where we built an archway in her backyard, and it looks like she's getting ready to fly away over the ocean. And the Stand Back compilation cover is one of the rooftop shots. That is one of my faves. We did Fleetwood Mac, Say You Will. So when I was a kid, I idolized the Life magazine guys. You know, the globe trotting, Leica carrying, in a scruffy bag with boots guys they were the studs. They'd fly around the world shooting whatever. They're battered Leica, and they'd always deliver it on time. And I thought, that's what I want to be. And when I finally had my first Time magazine cover, it was surreal. I was walking through the Orlando airport and saw a row of Time magazines with U2 on the cover. And I thought my ex-wife, or my wife at the time, was going to faint dead away. And there it was. And in those years, they weren't publishing Life magazine anymore, which was part of Time Life. And so this was as close as I was going to get to a Life cover. And I'm glad my mom was alive to see that. We'll put it that way. So that was 87. In 88, I ran into Bono at the Amnesty show in LA. And I said, hey, did you like our Time cover? It was my first one. And he said, well, it was my first one too. Ha ha ha. And never really told me if he liked it or not. But it was, that was a watershed moment for me. It's like, okay, I'm doing something right. It's not only a People magazine cover, it's a Time magazine cover. And I'd done a cover for Newsweek on Richard Nixon, of all people. And I've had other Time covers since then, but that was the big one for me. At the time, I was with a company called Corbis, which was owned by Bill Gates. They were competitors with Getty. And my editor there called me up and said, we're about to do this deal with Kellogg's to use a Mary Lou Retton photo on the cover of a Wheaties box. And I said, go for it, absolutely. It was a big chunk of change, and sure enough, a month later, I'm walking through Ralph's, there's the Wheaties box, and that was surreal. That was like when dying in surgery and you're watching the doctors operate on you from above kind of thing. It was just surreal. But those are the things I'm most proud of, you know. I mean, a Wheaties Box, baby. It still blows my mind. So, and I've had umpteen album covers. You know, Bruce Unplugged and Rod Unplugged and this one Unplugged, and I can't even remember half of them, you know.
Your career arc and how you started in New York, how you muscled your way in LA, became the guy over here with Zeppelin, then Fleetwood Mac, Springsteen, just like never ending. And then you become the guy again with one of the top published magazines in the world.
I mean, it's a parallel universe that I can't tell you how many assignments I've had that I had to reshoot something that someone else shot. My whole thing was to be versatile, and you know what? I got to be 50 and I was still shooting music and other stuff. I got to be 60 and etc. And now I'm 71 and a half. And,
happy sweet 16 times a few.
Thanks, you know, and now I just shoot what I want to.
That's good. Well, you've earned your spot.
Well, exactly, you know, and if it's not going to make me happy doing it, then the photos won't make anyone happy looking at them, and that's what matters. So.
That's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.